He's in the back there. Would you like to come
Oh,
forward?
yes.
So I'm not sure I need to say very much to introduce our guest. I guess he's a hedge fund guy from the Big Easy who's redeeming himself by contributing to education. And I feel a little bit shy about this because he has 3 degrees from an institution from which I only have 2. So I'm going to sit down and let you take it from there.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, well, thank you, thank you. Actually, I'm curious about all of y'all and how familiar y'all are with. Actually, how many of y'all are faculty members, just to get a sense of things? Okay, we got a couple here. And how many of you are graduate students? Okay, so the bulk of y'all. And how many of you are undergraduates? Okay, we have a few. And the graduate students, is it mainly in the Graduate School of Education? No? Okay, Graduate School of Education. All right, I don't know, engineering. I'm just making up departments now. Okay, and what was the rest of people? You just yell it out. Okay, there's business school, staff, administrators. What was that? Visitors, very nice. That's a good department. Very nice. Lower tuition. And how familiar, I mean, how many of y'all have actually used Khan Academy in some way, shape? Oh, wow. That's how many have no idea what Khan Academy is? Okay. So, and how many of y'all have gone to a talk that I've given before? That lets me know how well I can reuse some of my jokes. Okay, very good. All right. So it doesn't seem like too many of y'all. So the 7 or 8 of you, just bear with me. So what I'll start, I mean, what I hope to do I guess we have a little over an hour, is give a quick kind of overview of how I got started doing all of this and kind of what we're up to right now, and then just open it up to Q&A as quickly as possible. It's a fairly intimate group we got right over here. So just to start off with, I think most of y'all know Khan Academy has historically been associated with this collection of videos that I started making for my cousins. As we'll talk about, we see the videos as actually just one piece of Khan Academy, that most of what we're working on is other things. But just to get everyone on the same page, I'll show a little quick montage of what the videos look like. So where's the clicker? Is this straight on the computer? I'll just do it straight here. Oh, here it is. Here we go. And is the audio hooked up? Okay, let's see. Let's give it a shot. I'll do it directly here. Let's see. How does this work?
I didn't actually set it up. I'll find it.
Okay. Audio. Worst case, we'll go straight to Q&A. So how do we? Oh, it's not on. Here we go. There we go.
Over the surface, and the notation usually is a capital sigma. All of these interactions are just due to the gravity over interstellar, or almost you could call it intergalactic. This animal's fossils are only found in this area of South America. A nice clean band here. Notice this is an aldehyde, and it's an alcohol. Is there 30 million plus the $20 million from the American manufacturer. They create the Committee of Public Safety, which sounds like a very nice committee.
This is not Eve.
No, Botticelli's portrayed the ancient goddess of love.
This is 6 times 6 times 6, or 216.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hotter. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
It's just like 11.
Play with the pendulum and get a feel for how it moves.
Function as a bridge rectifier.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
I'm glad y'all appreciate Euler's identity. It's a sign of a smart audience. So just to give you all a sense of where Khan Academy is, and actually even these numbers are a little bit outdated. The last month we had 10 million unique users. We just crossed our 10 millionth registration. It's being used by someone in practically every country, in 30,000 classrooms in some way, shape, or form. We can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A. We've had over 1.5 billion exercises done on the platform, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the video views, I think we're at, well, it's not on this thing, but it's over. I think we're at 300-something million video views to date. But before talking about where we are now and where this is hopefully going, I'll just give a little bit about how all of this started. And I think a lot of y'all are somewhat familiar with this story. You rewind back 2004. And as was introduced at the time, I was 1 year out of business school. I was an analyst at a very small hedge fund in Boston. Literally, it was myself, my boss, and his dog. The dog was the chief economist. And it just came out, and I had some family visiting me in Boston, and I just came out of conversation that my oldest cousin who was visiting me, Nadia, was having trouble with mathematics. So I offered to tutor her remotely. She's based in New Orleans, that's where I grew up. And she agreed, so August of 2004, we just, every day after work for me, after school for her, we got on the speakerphone. We used, at the time, Yahoo Instant Messenger had a little doodle functionality in order to see each other's writing, and I just started working with her. And long story short, the first month was a little bit difficult. She'd kind of psyched herself out that she was just not good at mathematics. But then she slowly started making progress, caught up to her class, and then frankly, got a little bit ahead of her class. And at that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called her school up, and I said, you know, I really think Nadia Reimagined should retake that placement exam from last year. And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm her cousin. And somewhat surprisingly, they did let her retake that placement exam, and then she went from the slower math track all the way into the advanced one. And you know, I found that experience incredibly fulfilling. Just with a little bit of effort on my part, I was able to hopefully, you know, help direct or help the course for my cousin. So I then started working with her younger brothers. Then a couple of things happened. My boss, Dan Wohl, his wife became a professor here at Stanford in the law school. And so the whole firm, we moved out here to Palo Alto. We were actually based right here on Sand Hill Road, right next to the Safeway. And a couple of things happened. So this was now 18 months after that first kind of experience with my cousin. A couple of things happened. First, I started writing a little software thing for them to get practice problems. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, but it was hard to always curate it, and there was no way for me to keep track of what they were doing. So I wrote this little exercise generator that would give them fractions problems and basic equations and give them the explanations as they needed it. And that was the first Khan Academy. You know, I said, I need a website here. Let me think of a domain name. Khan Academy was available. You know, I said, oh, that sounds good. It sounds kind of good reputation, and it's available, so I'll go with it. And the other thing that happened over the course of the 18 months is word got around in the family that free tutoring was going on. So I found myself every day after work with about 10, 15 cousins, family, friends, working on math. And it was around that time, this is November of 2006, I was at a dinner party in San Mateo, right near here. And I was showing off all this software to some friends, and they all knew that I had this crazy tutoring project with all my cousins and some family friends. And one of my friends, Zuli, he said, well, you know, this is really cool, Sal, but how are you scaling yourself up? And I said, well, you know, the software is kind of helping, but you're right, I can't do with 15 cousins what I used to do with Nadia. And he said, well, I got an idea. It might work, it might help you a little bit. Why don't you make some of these lessons that you've been giving to your cousins, why don't you make them as videos and upload them onto YouTube? And I was immediately skeptical. I said, no, you know, YouTube is for cats playing piano. It's not for serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend, got over the idea that it wasn't my idea, and I decided to give it a shot. And you know, long story short, I uploaded those first few videos. I asked my cousins to kind of use it on their own time, at their own pace. When we had our phone calls, that was the time for them to ask questions. And then I asked them for some feedback, and you know, and they famously and backhandedly told me that they like me better on YouTube than in person. And you know, at first that statement is kind of shocking, that someone would like this, you know, kind of scalable on-demand version versus their actual live cousin. And I think it's important to kind of parse what they were saying and what they weren't saying. They were saying that they did appreciate having this on-demand resource, this thing that they didn't have to feel embarrassed about reviewing things, that they could watch when they were ready for it. What they weren't saying is that they somehow prefer that in entirety to me as a live individual. They still appreciated me taking interest in their life. They still appreciated me mentoring them, coaching them, being able to answer their questions. It's just the first time that they were learning the material, it was sometimes more comfortable to get it in this form factor. So I took it as positive feedback, and I just kept going. And it soon became clear that people who were not my cousins were watching. And at first, you know, I would just get random feedback off of YouTube, things like thank you. And even that was pretty profound. I don't know how much time y'all spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not thank you. They are slightly more PG-13. And so I kept going, but then the comments got intense. We got comments. This is the reason why I'm not failing algebra. This is the reason why I'm able to go and major in physics. I'm retiring from the military and I want to go back to college and I haven't seen math in 15 years and this is what's allowing me to connect. I got around 2008, actually 2007, 2008. I said, well, this is helping my cousins in math, and I started to see that there was a lot of in my family and even some of the junior analysts at the firm I was working for. I was like, oh, well, they could also use some financial videos. So I even started making some financial videos around then. And I got one letter, I remember, this was like fall of 2008, for those of you who remember that time. And it was someone who said, thank you so much for the video on mortgage-backed securities. I now know what I do for a living. So that was a very promising email. So you fast forward that all the way to 2009, and by that point, fall of 2009, the site or the videos were the software itself. I actually stopped allowing more people to register for it, which isn't your traditional strategy for growth, but it was kind of taking down whatever servers that I could afford. But the videos were taking on a life of their own. It was about 100,000 people were using it a month at that point, and frankly, it was all I could think about. And in 2008, I had set it up as a not-for-profit. And by 2009, when I set it up, I didn't think that this was what I was going to do for a living. I kind of imagined that I would go on a similar track to my boss, and at some point maybe I could fund this not-for-profit in some way. But by 2009, this is all I could think about. We had some savings, essentially for our down payment out here, which y'all know can be a substantive amount of money, even to get in. And but my wife and I sat down and said, well, look, it's not crazy to try to do this for real for a year. We could live off of savings for a little bit, and I think like any entrepreneurial anything, you're a little bit naive and optimistic. You say, oh yeah, sure. This is the social return on investment here is so huge. The scalability is so huge. Clearly, someone's going to fund this thing. Someone's going to see what the value is. So I quit my other job in fall of 2009, and then tried to kind of get Khan Academy off the ground as a real organization with funding, at minimum, so I could take a salary, and then eventually so we could hire up other people, get office space, et cetera. And like most of these stories, you start off optimistic. 9 months go by, and you start questioning what you just did. We were digging into our savings about $5,000 a month. Our son had just been born, and I was literally, there were some weaker moments where I was updating my resume, and then in May of 2010, all of a sudden, a $10,000 donation came in. And so I immediately see who this is. Her name was Ann Doer, based here in Palo Alto. And I immediately email her and I say, thank you very much for this generous donation. This is the largest donation that Khan Academy has ever received. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you. And Ann immediately emailed back and said, well, I love your site. I use it with my daughter. I use it myself. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. So it was literally, I think it was a few days later, we met at an Indian buffet restaurant, actually right here on University Ave, and over lunch, and Ann just asked, well, what's your goal here? And I told her, look, when I filled out the paperwork with the IRS to be a 501c3, there's this little part of the form that says mission : and they give you like a line and a half. And I said, well, I filled out a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Ann said, well, that's ambitious. How do you see yourself doing that? And I said, well, it's just a goal. Obviously, I don't think we're just going to achieve it next year, check it off, and then move on to healthcare or something. But it's maybe, no. But I think we can start to approach it. Videos are a piece of it. I want to keep making videos, hopefully the rest of my life. We can translate it. We can get it, other people and other subjects and other domains doing videos as well. But even the videos themselves are really just one part of the picture. In order to really start to learn things, you need feedback, you need interactivity, you need community. So I showed her some of the software that I had originally written for my cousins. I had little screenshots of it. And I said, I want to get a real team one day working on this. We can have all the interactive problem sets, feedback, dashboards for teachers, ways for people to help each other on the site eventually. And Ann said, well, you're surprisingly making a lot of progress here, but I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And so, Ann kind of nods, and, we pay the bill, and we part ways. And about 10 minutes later, I'm driving into my driveway. We had moved out to Mountain View, and I got a text message from Ann, and it said, "You really need to be supporting yourself. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day. And frankly, it was the beginning of a crazier and crazier series of events. You fast forward about a month. I was with another friend, Aragon. I was running a summer camp, this little 1-week thing in Portola Valley at a middle school there, and it was really around the idea of, I've never believed that the virtual education would be the only education that anyone really should get. That the virtual could handle a lot of the traditional skills, core skills, make sure you master them, but that really is all about freeing up the physical experience so it can be more human, more engaging. And so I was intrigued by what could we do in a physical environment if it's not about lecture, if it's not about traditional skill development and problem sets. So it was a bunch of games and simulations with some middle school students, and we were in the middle of one where I had 6 kids playing a game of Risk, and then I had the other 20 trading securities based on the outcome of the game of Risk. And very good game. And while that was happening, I got another series of text messages from Ann, which you could imagine I now take very seriously. And they read along the lines, they were actually hard to read, they read along the lines of, "At the Aspen Ideas Festival in the main pavilion, Bill Gates on stage with Walter Isaacson, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy." So I didn't know what to make of what she was saying, and so I immediately boot the nearest 7th grader off of a computer, and I look for some evidence on the internet of this thing that appears to be happening. And after about 20 minutes, I actually did find the footage. It was uploaded, and it was literally, Walter Isaacson asked Bill Gates, "What are you excited about?" And he just starts talking about, "Hey, there's a site I use for myself. I've been about finance. I use it with my kids for their math. It's called Khan Academy." And he just went on and on and on about it. And so you can imagine what was going through my mind at the moment. At one level, this was surreal. This was exciting. On the other hand, it kind of made me nervous. Those videos were for Nadia, not Bill Gates. And then, frankly, I went home that night. I obviously told everyone I knew, my wife and all my friends. But then I didn't know what to do next. What's the protocol here? Do I call him? I'm assuming he's not listed. And they left me in that kind of limbo, weird state for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I was literally in our walk-in closet about to record a video, and a cell phone rings, and I see the numbers from Seattle. So I said, "Hello?" It says, "Hi, my name is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan." "Yeah, I heard that. If you're free in the next few weeks, we'd love to fly you up to Seattle and find out more about what you're doing and maybe ways that we could support you." And I was looking at my calendar for the month at the moment, completely blank. So I said, "Yeah, I have to cut my nails on Wednesday, but I think I could go meet Bill Gates." But yeah, so I went, and we had a very similar meeting to kind of the meeting with Ann. At the same time, some folks from Google reached out and also asked kind of, at first they were a little bit more circular or kind of going, what would you do with more resources, et cetera, but it was clear that they were taking some interest in what was happening or what Khan Academy could be. And so it all hit in fall of 2010. The Gates Foundation and Google both provided the initial significant support so that we could become a real organization, get office space, start hiring up a real team to work on it. And what we immediately started investing in was kind of the interactive part of Khan Academy, the exercises. And this right over here is a picture of our knowledge map. And the whole idea of the knowledge map is right now going through kind of a redesign process. But I like to show it because it's at a very high level, it kind of shows how we think about a learning progression, at least in mathematics and maybe things close to mathematics. As you see at the top is kind of basic arithmetic, addition and subtraction. As you go further and further down this graph, you're getting to more and more advanced mathematics, and right now the graph goes all the way down to early calculus, and hopefully by the end of this year, all the way through calculus. And as you see, this is a subset. The videos you just saw, those go well beyond math, but right now our interactive part is mainly math. And the model is pretty straightforward. If you can show proficiency or mastery on a more basic concept, we'll forward you to the next one. And then once you show mastery there, we'll forward you to the one after that. And on a lot of levels, that's kind of common sense. It's the way that you would play a video game. You beat the level 1 boss, and then you go to level 2. It's the way you would learn in a martial art. You take the white belt exam, and then once you take the test and you pass it, then you become a yellow belt. But what I always point out is this is not the way that a traditional school model works. In a traditional school model, we batch students together, usually by age. We move them together at a set pace, usually with some type of a state-mandated calendar or curriculum. And let's say that the current unit that we're all working on is exponents, basic exponents. This is the unit in our class for the next 2 or 3 weeks. We have some combination of teacher gives lecture during class time, we go home, do homework, maybe we review a little bit of homework, another lecture, homework, lecture, homework. Then after 2 or 3 weeks, bam, you get an exam. And on that exam, maybe I get an 80, maybe you get a 90, maybe you get a 70. Actually, you would get higher than a 70, I just saw it's Dr. Prober. You get a 95. And then even though the exam identified those gaps, even the 95% student didn't know 5% of the material, much less you could fail a test. You got a 60%, and even though there's 40% of the material, even that test identified you not knowing, the class will then move on to the next subject, say negative exponents or logarithms, something that builds on that foundation. And to kind of put it in perspective how on some level absurd that is, imagine if we did other things in our life that way. Say home building. So you get the contractor in, and you say, well, we've been told we got 3 weeks to build the foundation. Do what you can. So contractor comes in. Maybe it rains. Maybe some of the supplies don't show up. 3 weeks later, the inspector comes. Says, yeah, the concrete's still wet right over there. That part's not quite up to code. I'll give it an 80%. You say, oh, great, that's a C. Let's build the first floor. Same thing, build the first floor. You have 2 weeks, contractor, do what you can. They do what they can, maybe it's a 75%. You build the second floor, third floor, fourth floor, and then all of a sudden, while building the fourth floor, the whole thing collapses. And if the reaction to that is similar to the reaction that a lot of people have in the education system, you'd say, oh, we had a horrible contractor. Or you'd say, oh, we didn't have good inspection, or we needed more inspections. But the reality is what was broken, maybe the contractor, maybe the inspection, but what was really broken was the process. You were artificially constraining how long you had to do something. Then you had an inspection, you identified gaps, you identified weaknesses, and then you completely ignored them, and then you keep moving on. And so what we're trying to build for and what we try to advocate is, well, let's do things the other way around. Instead of holding fixed how long you have to learn something and when you learn it, and the variable is how well you learn it, A, B, C, D, F, do it the other way around. Everyone should learn exponents really, 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 really well. Everyone should essentially get to that A level in exponents, and then the variable is how long you have to learn it and when you actually learn the material. This right over here, this is stuff that we've launched recently on Khan Academy. For those of y'all who might have been on Khan Academy, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, or even many years ago, right when you went, it was kind of a search bar. There was kind of a video experience, and if you dug around a little bit, you found the exercises. Now it's kind of the other way around. The exercises are really the central piece of what when you go to Khan Academy. If you log in, the first thing it'll ask you to do is take a pretest. And the whole idea there, it's a very short pretest, is to kind of start building a model of what you know and don't know. And there's actually some fairly sophisticated machine learning going on in the background to try to understand what you know and what you don't know, and cluster you with other users on the site. Once you take a pretest, then your kind of knowledge graph gets filled in. So each of those tiles that you see up there, you can imagine each of those are kind of a concept in mathematics. So one of those tiles might be basic exponents. Another one might be surface area of a cube. Another one might be factoring quadratics, whatever it might be. And the color is how well the system currently thinks you know it. That gray color means you haven't really shown any evidence yet. Light blue shows you've practiced it but not quite mastered it. And then the deeper of blue it gets, the more confident the system is that you've mastered it. And the way you get to mastery, or the way you first get 3 in a row, 5 in a row to get the kind of the light blue state, but then to get the mastery, later on you have to do these kind of review context switching environment things to make sure that you still know how to do it. You didn't just learn it for one period of time. You can later see how to apply it when there's different types of problems. We could talk more about this in the Q&A, but we're doing a very serious push right now on the Common Core that's obviously been adopted by 46 states. And these are some of the folks that we're doing it in conjunction with. This is actually now a subset. We've added some even more folks who are helping us write these items. Even now, we have on the order of about 100,000 items just in mathematics, which is really, and we're really trying to be a superset of the Common Core. This right here is an example of what an exercise looks like. I like to show this one because it shows you can do things in this form factor that you kind of couldn't have done with a traditional textbook or even a traditional chalkboard. And this one, I like to just show this one because it kind of shows what you can do in terms of trying to give students explanations or hints in as intuitive of a way as possible. And actually, this was an exercise that was directly made for the Common Core, where it's really focused on students understanding kind of two-dimensional nets and being able to make three-dimensional figures. This is what it looks like after you take a mastery challenge, kind of a mini report card for the student. And you see we've always had game mechanics, and we're trying to introduce more and more game mechanics to help keep kids motivated, energy points, badges, things like that. This is, I had talked about this when I first met Anne and Bill Gates. One of the exciting things here is, unlike a traditional textbook where you kind of publish it and you have no idea of how it's being used, this form, or even a traditional lecture, you give the lecture, you have no idea what was going on in people's minds. Here we can get all sorts of data in real time to understand what's going on. We have 5 million problems being done on the site per day. And this is just an example of one experiment that we ran that kind of had some pretty neat results. We're probably running 20 experiments as we speak. How many of y'all are familiar with Carol Dweck's work around growth mindsets? Okay, so there's a good number of y'all. So just to paraphrase, it's really this idea of, instead of motivating people around innate ability, because all of a sudden, if they find themselves in a context where their innate ability isn't paying off, they might want to disengage to protect that perception of themselves. Instead of doing that, it's much better to motivate around growth, around perseverance, around work ethic. And this is just an experiment we did to say, well, this looks like interesting research. It seems like it'll make sense. Let's see if it works on our site. So we started putting these kind of growth mindset headers randomly on top of problems and saw what happened to the number of problems done. And just with that, we saw a 4% increase. And we could talk more about some of the other experiments we've done, even around growth mindsets, where we've emailed teachers. We actually were going to email them for a completely different purpose. But then we said, hey, well, this could be an experiment. Let's make the last question in one of the sets talk about growth mindset and see what those teacher students do. And even there, we saw a noticeable increase in the amount of work the students did from just the teacher who got the email about growth mindsets. And so that was a very tenuous connection, but it still showed results. This is kind of I showed this dashboard to give a picture of how this could be used in a classroom. I didn't imagine in 2010 that it would be used in classrooms very quickly, but that's kind of surprised us. Famously, Los Altos was one of the first districts that wanted to understand how this could be used. And we suggested, well, look, let's let every student learn at their own pace. We'll give the teachers dashboards so that they can do direct interventions, so that maybe peer-to-peer learning could go on. And this is what one of those dashboards look like, where each row here is a student in the class, and each column here is one of those concepts that you saw on that knowledge graph. And where the teacher can walk around, updates in real time, and say, okay, well, let's see. Right here, Maureen's having trouble with multiplying decimals. Well, Marcia's already mastered this. Maybe I could pair them together, or maybe I can go sit down next to Maureen and try to intervene with her. And we give her much more data to understand what she's been doing, and let every other student continue to work at their own pace. This is some data from Oakland Unity School it's a charter school here in Oakland, California, and this is an interesting case, and I stress at Peter McIntosh at Oakland Unity because it's one of those things, and I think a lot of y'all are in their ed school. It's very hard to separate the different variables of what is actually driving the results, and it's pretty clear that a lot of the results are being driven by just a ton of amazing things that the school is actually doing, the school itself, that the teacher is doing. And as evidence of that, before Khan Academy even showed up, the school had improved from the 20th percentile in California to the 76th percentile. But since then, and once again, it's really hard to say how much is Khan Academy, how much is Peter McIntosh. And frankly, I think the answer is this wouldn't have happened without Peter McIntosh, but what empowered Peter McIntosh is that we gave him a tool to allow students to start to work at their own pace. But we've seen fairly dramatic results even from that first big jump they have. That school is now operating at the 98th percentile for ninth grade algebra classes. And this is a inner city Oakland. A lot of these kids show up on the door 2-3 years behind grade level. And now they're one of the top performing schools in the state. And what's exciting about this, and I stress, this isn't like we just dropped it in, it was some magic thing that happened. It's mostly the teacher here. But he had a very important insight, which was, obviously he's a math teacher, and Khan Academy, the interactive stuff's about teaching math. But he says, I don't view Khan Academy as a math tool. I view it as a mindset changing tool. That traditionally these students came in disengaged, they were passive, they didn't really take ownership of their learning, and that Khan Academy allowed him to become a coach to change the students' mindsets. And once he changed their mindsets, then they kind of they took over from there. The next video is, this is in schools, so there's 30,000 classrooms in some way, shape, or form right now. That's touching about 1 million students, but still 90% of our users are outside of, are not using it in a formal setting. And this next video is, I think, a good example of kind of how much potential there is out there that can be tapped into if you just allow people to.
So I actually dropped out of high school twice, both during my freshman year. And when I eventually came back, I was put in sort of lower level math and science classes because I was so behind. Then I discovered Khan Academy, and I was able to skip 2 years worth of math just through using the site. And I came into school, I took the exam with students who had been enrolled in the class all year, and I was actually able to get the highest or the second highest scores in the class. So for me, Khan Academy really changed the trajectory of my entire life, because without it, I don't think I ever really would have been inspired to learn and to love math and to love science. I ended up graduating as a valedictorian and going on to Princeton, where I'm now a computer science major, and I'm absolutely passionate about learning about computers, about math, about science. And without Khan Academy, I don't think that these things would really matter to me the way that they do today. So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone at Khan Academy, Saul and the team. Please keep doing the good work that you're doing, because you're really changing lives.
So we told him he should apply for an internship. That's the least we could do. And actually, well, we could talk more about that story. And there's a ton of stories like that, and all moving in different ways. So one thing that's probably a lot of y'all thinking about, well, this is great. Everything I've talked about so far is essentially the world most of us live in, the developed world, the English-speaking world. What about the rest of the world, where maybe in some parts the students have next to nothing? And what's been happening, and this is actually even predates, this goes back to 2007, other NGOs have been reaching out and saying, hey, can we take your materials and put them on offline servers on DVDs, or we'll set them up in computer labs somehow and take them to kids all over the planet? And we said, yeah, absolutely. That's the whole reason why we exist. Do it. And so all of these are pictures of Khan Academy being used in different use cases all over the planet. And they're all exciting in their own way. But probably the most exciting are the pictures on the top right there. I used to give talks like this and say, who knows, maybe one day this would be used in Mongolia. I was just trying to think of the furthest part of the planet that I could imagine. And then about a year and a half ago, I got an email from Mongolia, from that young girl right over there. Her name is Zaya on the top right. And she sent a YouTube video, actually not too different than the one you just saw, how she liked Khan Academy, how I was helping her in math. I was very excited, but I immediately assumed she must be middle class, upper middle class. She had access to the internet. She spoke English quite well. But then I read the text of the email, and it turned out that there was a group of engineers from Cisco Systems that was spending their vacation time setting up computer labs in orphanages in Mongolia. And what you see in the top right there, those are actually the orphan girls in Mongolia using Khan Academy, and Zaya was one of those orphans. And that by itself was pretty mind-blowing. But then on top of that, since she sent that, she's now become one of the top contributors of math content in the Mongolian language. So she's become kind of hopefully a kind of a teacher for her people. And just to kind of visualize what's happening now on the internationalization front, some of y'all might know we launched Khan Academy Spanish about a month and a half ago. And that's not just the videos, it's the exercises, dashboards, everything. We're going to launch Khan Academy Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese in the very near future, followed by Turkish, French, Arabic, on and on and on, eventually all of the world's major languages. But to get a sense of what that feels like, I'll show you this next montage.
Si decimos que bueno, esta fue la primera cara y esta fue la segunda cara.
तो ये जो है जो ऑब्जर्वर यहाँ कहीं बैठा होगा तो उसको ये इमेज जो है
那个角就是正弦数值对应的角。Мы можем обе стороны разделить на b plus a.
Également sur la dernière leçon, שהנקודה בשאלה. אז למעשה זה רק השינוי בערך y.
واسه انگلیزه رو ما اگه بدیم به نونوایی چیزی
এখন দুই কার্বন যুক্ত অ্যাসিটাইল কোয়ে উৎপন্ন হয়
Auf der Zahlengerade zeichnen. Hier ist meine Zahlengerade.
Mas é claro que ele fez muitas e muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
So this is just what kind of a screenshot of the Spanish Khan Academy that's been recently launched. And you'll see many other languages coming out shortly. And so the original tagline here was just the necessities. And he actually has two things. He has a laptop and he's got a bell. So just something to keep in mind. So, big picture, I tell this to the team at Khan Academy all the time. It feels like we're at a special point, possibly in history. This isn't even, I don't even view this as a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. I sometimes phrase this as it's a once in a millennium opportunity where, just possibly this thing called education that has historically, well, it's always been the determinant of who can plug into society and who can't, who's a have versus who's a have not. But it's always been very scarce and it's always been very expensive. And as it kind of, the incarnation of it that became dominant over the last 200 years was also very unpersonal. And what's exciting about where we are now is just maybe, and it's not going to happen overnight, there's a lot of issues to address, and hopefully we'll talk about them in a few minutes, but it feels like there's an opportunity to start taking this scarce thing, the scarce determinant of kind of who succeeds, and making it commonplace, making it ubiquitous. And so our hope is, next 5, 10, 50 years, it's not going to be an easy thing to do, that we can start, like clean drinking water or shelter, make education a fundamental human right. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We have about half an hour for questions. You want to take them yourself?
All right.
And we have microphones.
Okay.
For those who have comments or questions, could you introduce yourself to the group?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Katie Kormanik. I taught the 4-credit statistics class at Udacity, and now I'm an instructional designer at the Graduate School of Business. And I think that you've done a lot to really change the way people think about education delivery. But I've noticed that, and you've said before, that you don't really edit your videos. You kind of just sit down, do it. And I noticed in one video you spend almost half the video just trying to erase one of the slides. But at the same time, I think that's how you're able to make so many videos. And so I'm wondering, some people in MOOCs, they can spend thousands of dollars making a 5-minute video. And do you think that Khan Academy has been able to be so impactful because of the quantity? I mean, it's obviously going to be some level of quality because you're teaching them, but if you had actually edited the videos and spent more time on that, what's the opportunity cost?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's something that we've struggled with, and I mean, you're right. Like I mean, there's a few videos where it was like, I did this big hairy video on the Krebs cycle, and like at one point I just said the wrong phrase. I was like, no, I don't want to redo it. And I might edit out that little thing. But you're right. 90% of the videos, there's no editing involved. A lot of times it is if halfway I found myself with an error, I'll just redo the video. And hopefully most of the old videos where I'm kind of just, those were the 4 Nadia videos where I'm like, oh, where's the eraser on this software tool? But anyway, there's still a few of those out there. But it's an interesting question because it's a, from the beginning, there's this kind of assumption out there, and predates Khan Academy. If you look at videos that existed, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, education videos usually made by publishers or sometimes PBS or something. they spend a lot of money on them. They have computer graphics. They have, they'll get James Earl Jones to show up, and actually usually not James Earl. They'll get like the person who like recorded your GPS device to show up, and do voiceover and all of that. And on one level, when you just look at it, it looks really impressive. And if you were just like say, hey, that looks polished, that's good stuff. But then if you actually try to learn from it, it's not going at the pace that a human brain would actually process it. And you can oftentimes tell that someone's just reading. They're not actually thinking through this thing in real time. They're not kind of making their thoughts transparent. And so, I don't think there's one best way to do this. I think there'll probably be, for different subjects and for different producers, there'll be different kind of best ways to do it. But I guess we haven't seen evidence that like high polish actually gets you to a better outcome, and it might even get you to a worse outcome because people don't feel connected with it. It doesn't feel as authentic. I know even like a lot of folks have they edit out the certain parts of it, and it does go faster. But I don't know the answer here, and this is stuff that we hope to test actually, but it's not clear that it's actually giving the person time to think about it and process it. So it's an open question, and we don't know the answers, but we hope to test it. But I guess the simple answer is until we get evidence that and probably in certain domains you do want highly produced things, we should probably just continue with be a decent level of professionalness, but try to not lose the humanity and the real time nature of it. Right here.
How do you think about what content? Could you introduce yourself, please? I am Sanjeev. How do you think about what content to source and from whom? I mean, there are probably great educators all over the globe. So how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, no, another good question, and something that we've struggled with as well. Even from like the early days of Khan Academy, like November 2006, my first instinct was like, yeah, I made 20 videos, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to tackle everything. Let me get some of my smart friends together, and some of them were kind of interested, but no one really had the time to work on it. So I just kind of kept going. You fast forward until maybe 2010, 2011. Now Khan Academy had real funding. People started to know about us. But the question was still, how do you find folks for this form factor? And it is a strange form factor. It's at least our style was much more of the people who want to be conversational, who want to kind of talk things through, give the intuition about things, and we've worked with some folks who if you chat with them over coffee about their subject area, they're fascinating. You're like, man, if I could just record this and we could record what we're being scribbled on the napkin, this would be an amazing video. But as soon as you press record, they're like, PowerPoint, I have 3 things I want to talk about. First thing, and it becomes a very, you lose all the humanity in it. So what we found ourselves doing is being very opportunistic about it. We're really just discovering folks. And you saw some of those art history videos there. At around the same time that I was starting up, you had these 2 art historians, Beth Harris and Stephen Zucker. Beth was working at the MoMA. Stephen was the head of art history at the Pratt. And they had this project to kind of do a video art history textbook. And at one point, there was some article about Khan Academy getting funding, and they sent out a snarky tweet saying, I guess we should have done math videos. And I was like, who are these people? And I looked at their videos. I was like, wow, this is really good stuff. It made me want to have an opinion about art history. It felt approachable. It didn't feel, I wasn't scared of it. It didn't feel elitist like it often does. And so I reached out to them. We started talking. We kind of were very aligned, and we did a not-for-profit merger, which essentially we gave them jobs. And so they've been doing amazing things, and that's blossomed into a whole series of things. They're now the 2 primary voices on the Google Art Project. I don't know if y'all have recently seen these announcements we made where MoMA is the New York MoMA has a presence now on Khan Academy. The Getty has a presence on Khan Academy, and it's really blossomed out of the work that Beth and Stephen have done, and it's really starting a conversation around what should museums be, and how can museums extend their experience beyond just the physical. We have other folks, you saw some videos. There's Britt Cruz. He kind of does these documentary style. They're actually more highly produced videos. They're kind of Nova style things about kind of applied mathematics. But at the same time, we're like, wow, he's really getting at the root of things. It's really fascinating. We really feel like we're learning a lot from it. So we brought him into the fold. So right now, it's been very opportunistic on one level. You know, the Brit Cruises and the Beth and Stevens, these are just like, hey, there's talent there. Let's bring them in. And then there's obviously known brands like the MoMA, the Getty, Stanford Medical School, that are like, hey, they're making videos. They want to work with us. We absolutely should do this together. Oh, yeah?
Hello, I'm Bob Siegel. I'm in microbiology, immunology, human biology, and African studies. Actually, the last time I was in this room, I was getting a degree in teacher education 3 decades ago. So,
wow.
You're a remarkable speaker, incredibly engaging, and I think what you've done is really changing the world, and it's brilliant. But I'm going to ask first my stock question. Every single talk I've heard on alternative education has been a lecture. And so the question is, can you say why you think that is? And I don't think it's a trivial question, actually. And the other question I want to ask about is, you talked about how you think people should go at their own pace. And going back even further to the 60s, I was actually part of a public high school. It was actually started in elementary school called the ES 70 project. And basically the whole purpose was we went at our own pace, and it was the most profound thing that ever happened in my education, especially in terms of math and science. So I think the implementation is new and brilliant, but I don't think the idea is new and brilliant.
Yeah. No. So
comment on this one?
yeah, on both things. So I like on the first one, you're absolutely right. I mean, how many lectures there are on differentiated instruction or self-paced learning? Well, you're still giving a lecture on it. I mean, I think there are times, like I think where shared experience is valuable, where if you're maybe in church together, or you're at a TED Talk, or you're getting a story. I think that's where it's nice to be in a room with people and laugh together and clap together and maybe cry together, and so that has emotive value. I think that starts to break down, because something like that, regardless of whether you're a PhD in quantum physics or whether you're a 9-year-old, you're going to understand what's going on, and you're going to enjoy that energy of the room. That starts to break down all of a sudden when it starts to become biochemistry, or if it starts to become calculus, where people really are at different levels, and people really need different paces, and they're actually almost no one's going to be able to zone into very dense subject matter for the entire duration of a lecture. And so in my mind, and we've had conversations about potentially working on a school of some sort. I think that's kind of where I would draw the difference. It would be sometimes nice to bring students together and get pumped up about things and get inspired, but then the actual lesson delivery should not be a lecture. In terms of the kind of the ideas, I mean, this is one thing I try to stress as much as possible, and even in my book I stress it all over the place, is none of these ideas are actually new. The self-paced learning idea isn't new. The mastery-based learning idea isn't new. In my book I cite, going back in the 1920s, you had people handing out worksheets, and they saw amazing gains. I mean, they had amazing gains in student retention and their attitudes towards math and the teacher's joy of the job. We saw it again in the 70s. It's been validated multiple times. Every time, though, what's happened in the past is that people felt, well, this is just impractical. The logistics of it were difficult, or the tools are expensive to pull it off. What I think might be different this time is the tools are much easier to use, hopefully. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they're getting there, and they're much more kind of available. And I think you're also seeing things happen at, I think actually what happens at places like Stanford will actually matter a lot too, where you're seeing elite institutions starting to question, hey, why are we having 300 people in a lecture hall for freshman calculus? Why shouldn't we break it up somehow, or have it more interactive in some way? And I think as that starts to happen, then a lot of people want to emulate what Stanford is doing, other colleges and other high schools and grade schools, and so that type of practice will come down. I mean, what I say is, personal education 400 years ago was personalized education. It's just very few people got it. It was, the princes or the nobility got 4 or 5 personal tutors, and it was everything we're talking about. And then, around the late 1700s, early 1800s, the Prussians said, hey, we should have mass public education, which was a great idea, but they said, how do we do it practically? And they said, well, how do we do anything practically at scale, at reasonable cost? Well, we batch things together, move them together at a set pace. At some point we'll have tests to decide what product is good, what product isn't good, and we'll filter them to kind of the appropriate places. And they essentially constructed a school system like that. And then that got inherited by the British, by the Americans, by the Japanese, by the rest of the world. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was probably the best way to do it, and that's responsible for a lot of the growth the world's seen in the last 200 years. But it does feel like, now it's ripe to maybe move the dial in a different way.
Hi, Sam. My name is Angad.
Oh, yes, we met last weekend.
In school education. I think a big part of what educational institutions do is the certification or the degree. A school or a college, that's a part of the reason why people go there. Can you talk about how this fits in with your vision of the future of the credential?
Yeah, so, right now Khan Academy is, we're focused on the learning part of education. You're right, education is a bunch of things. There's learning, which is kind of what most people associate it with, but a very big part of education is the credential, and there's also a pretty important part of the socialization, getting to meet your peers and network with them, et cetera. So we are primarily focused on the first right now, on the learning part. Credentialing will be an interesting thing. This is something that I've written a lot about and I talk a lot about. I think we probably do need to move to a world. You have several problems that are happening in credentials right now. Stanford and Harvard's and all these are special cases. 99% of students don't go to a branded institution like this. They spend a lot of time, a lot of money. They go to often a regional college, a community college. And even if they get a 4.0 GPA, even if they do everything they did while holding a job, Google's not going to interview them. There's just no way for them to plug into kind of whatever direction they want to go in. And so I think there is a need for the students and actually a need for employers. Because right now all of the employers are fighting over the same 1% of the students who have a high GPA from 10 or 15 universities, or at least some of the employers out in Silicon Valley. Even though there is a lot of talent out, kind of less traditional talent, that just doesn't have those signals to show someone. So I think there's not only there's a need for kind of decoupled credentials, so that if you are, maybe you're a rock star programmer who flunked out of high school, who dropped out, who knows what it might be, but you should somehow be able to prove to Google or Facebook that, hey, look, I can, in this dimension, I can hang with anybody. I can contribute to your organization. Or if you're a laid off factory worker, most white collar jobs require good critical thinking, ability to write and ability to communicate. You really don't need more than that. Those aren't easy things to attain, but if you can do those things, you can do most white collar jobs. And so if you're a laid off factory worker, you're 45 years old, well, if there's one way for you to prove that or for you to develop those skills without, having to take 4 years off, that could be a really valuable thing. It goes back to this structural unemployment issue. People always view it as a skills gap, but it often could just be a signaling gap, that you have the skills and there's no way to prove it to someone. Who has the microphone? Oh, yeah, you have the microphone. Yes, you win.
Hi, Mark. I'm working with citizen schools a little bit on their direction going into blended learning. You mentioned earlier
and
that...
which citizen schools? Because there's two organizations I know.
The one headquartered in Boston.
Oh, okay. There's one in Pakistan. But yeah. So I know which one you're talking about.
All right. So you talked earlier about aligning with Common Core standards, but wanting to go actually beyond and be a sort of like a superset. And we know it's a wide and deep ocean as far as what can be covered and how. Can you talk a little bit about what the thinking or a plan is as far as interfacing or integrating with third-party or external capabilities, tools for simulations, modeling, visualization, and so forth? I know you're open source or open, but what's your thinking or plan for going beyond that?
Yeah, that's always been a difficult thing because we're still a small organization. We 3 years ago we were one person. 2 years ago we were like 10 people. A year ago we were like 30 people, and now we're 50 people. So we're still like a super small organization. And our problem has been just interfacing sometimes is kind of hard. we have like a million things on our product pipeline, and then to kind of try to interface with someone else's API. Some of the stuff that we are doing, though, is we are starting to bring in researchers. There's actually a few postdocs from Stanford who are using the anonymized data sets to do research. So we're, the research API is one of the first things that we've been, because that helps us get better. If they find something, hey, on this A/B test, this version is better, we'll say, hey, that's going to be the default now. In terms of others, I guess the simplest, we're always open to it, but it tends to be kind of, there's a lot of overhead in partnerships. I think the ones that we are most interested in are the ones that are like ultra high yield. So the Common Core, that's not even a partnership. That's just like, we should do this. Next year, 46 states, teachers are going to, like, what is this Common Core? People are confused now. We're like, hey, this is an opportunity. When we talk about kind of where we are in history, one of the opportunities is actually this Common Core that even, I've given talks to 1,000 teachers in the room, and they all philosophically, no one disagrees with this. They don't say, hey, everyone should learn at their own pace and no one should master concepts, and they don't believe that. But they're so overloaded that they're like, well, gee, how do I have time to re-engineer my class? And well, inertia is just I'm gonna do what I've been doing. But this Common Core is kind of the inertia, like you have to rethink your classroom as is. And so some of what we're asking teachers to do is a departure from what they did in the past. But if we can kind of make up for it by saying, hey, look, here's some really good resources that will give you confidence that your students will do fine on the Common Core, that are good implementations of the Common Core, then we think we'll be helping them, and it'll be our chance to kind of help have them rethink the classroom. Who has the microphone? Oh, yes.
Yeah, they've been preceding them. Yes. Well, hi, Sal. Thanks for coming out today. My name is Noah Friedman. I'm a software developer on staff here at Stanford, and I've worked with a couple of NGOs looking at education technology for development. We've taken Conlight to places around the world.
Oh, awesome.
But my question is, when I first learned about Khan Academy and mainly the tremendous successes that it's enjoyed, what really struck me was, wow, what does this say about the state of the open education resources field, that the best thing out there is basically one guy recording some videos. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the education resource.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it was a that was essentially my fundraising pitch in 2009. Anyway, but I think. And one thing I do try to emphasize, Khan Academy is much more than one guy making videos now. Yeah. Now we have this whole team. But you're, in some ways, you're right. What kind of gave, at the time, me the opportunity to get, for someone to believe that, hey, maybe they can pull off this software stuff and this self-paced learning and these teacher dashboards and all of this type of stuff is because they saw that just this one guy making videos was getting a lot of traction. My sense of it is, and I've had long conversations with many people in the open education resources. I just assumed even when I started making it that this is open education. Then I later learned about Creative Commons licenses and all that. So, oh yeah, I'll do one of those. And so we made it Creative Commons attribution non-commercial, share alike. And even then, and we could go into the details of what that means, but people creative in the open education says, well, you should get rid of the non-commercial because it becomes harder for it to reuse. And we got into these huge debates, and there was actually a major foundation in those early days that was gonna fund Khan Academy. They were one of the big funders of open education resources, and they said, oh, you got this non-commercial clause on it, that's not real open. And we went back and forth, and I think those conversations kind of made me feel like the focal point was wrong, that it was much more around they almost became religious conversations around what is open, what is not, is that versus like let's just do this. Let's just make a lot of content, put it out there, test it out, get feedback from people, and iterate on the feedback. So I think a lot of it might have just been that, I take a lot of inspiration from what MIT did in 2000, 2001 with OpenCourseWare, but even back then on their YouTube channel, they turned off the comments. So they weren't able to get the feedback of like, hey, this was a really great video, but it would have been nicer if it was 9 shorter videos. Or, hey, can you give better titles for your videos so that I know, what I want? Or, and I think some of it was that feedback loop that did it. Some of it might have just been, because I started with my cousins, I didn't, if in 2004 or 2006, Bill Gates had kind of descended and said, here's a few $1 million, Mr. Hedge Fund Analyst, make some videos, I probably would have done what everyone else did. I probably would have gone and gotten a video film crew, some computer graphics animators, hired James Earl Jones, and done that thing. And I think that might have not connected with people as much. And I think that might be some of the, so I don't know the answer, but I think it's some of it.
Hi, Saul. My name is Mitchell Stevens. I'm a faculty member here in the Graduate School of Education, a sociologist. I'm working with the Lytics Lab group and John Mitchell to help us build research capacity for the new data sciences that you guys are actively building. And I wanted to direct people to another open education resource. Your colleague Jace Kohlmeyer gave a great talk here last spring called From Machine Learning to Optimized Learning, a very crisp picture of what the possibilities are for these new data sciences. And if you go to a website called Education's Digital Future, edf.stanford.edu, go to the topics button link, and there's some resources on the new data sciences of teaching and learning. If you scroll down, there's a bunch of resources there, and one of them is Jace's, the digital capture of Jace's talk. It's a great option. I wanted to ask you on the data science side. As you know, at Stanford, we're very serious about creating conditions under which this research can be leveraged for educational improvement. One of the things that we talk about here is another epical shift at this moment is throughout the 20th century, educational data was largely the product of states and para-government organizations, and it was had gated access for researchers like a lot of my colleagues here in the Graduate School of Education, who were given the privilege of having access to those data that were basically underwritten by public coffers. And now we're at a moment where a great deal of the best data on teaching and learning are held by not-for-profit entities like your own, or proprietary entities like Coursera and Udacity. And it seems to me that there's there's a lot of uncertainty about what kind of research infrastructure we should build for sharing those data, accessing those data, creating sort of international standards for what counts as a finding, what a unit of analysis is. If you could help us, how are you guys thinking about that side of things, and how are you thinking about your own contributions to this emerging ecology of data production and analysis?
No, I mean, excellent point, and I do encourage anyone who's interested in data analytics to kind of look at that. Jace is our head of analytics, and actually he's an ex-hedge fund guy. He's got an interesting story himself. I mean, the simple answer is, one of the things I hope, and I tell this to potential funders as well, one of the things I hope even in 10 years that Khan Academy is known for. Hopefully it'll be known for, this resource where anyone can access this stuff. Hopefully it'll be known for, wow, this is really a cutting edge tool that adapts to you. And hopefully it's known for, wow, this is like maybe the platform for cognitive research, for ed research. And obviously, that validates the platform, but that also makes the platform better. Where like, look, you just saw something on our platform that's better. Well, we're going to apply that. In terms of what we're doing right now, Jace, we have a 7-person analytics team, and to different degrees, some of the folks are researchers who are looking to get publishable results, but a lot of it is also still much more kind of product focused in terms of, hey, are we making the right recommendations to students? If a student says that they don't know how to do something, how do we use that data? How do we make inferences without skipping people's gaps in their knowledge? And so these really tough just product problems. And so it's kind of we're doing what we can right now. And I mean, I think the simplest answer is anyone who's really serious about doing this type of work, I think Jace and the whole team there is very receptive to it. Either showing up at our office, I mean, especially here at Stanford, we're very close by. And as we work with more and more folks, I think then we'll learn, hey, what kind of APIs can we expose? What type of this work is really productive and moving the ball forward versus, yeah, I mean, that's nice, but it's not directly affecting our mission just yet. So near term, we're doing what we can, but longer term, hopefully it becomes a major part of content. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that Washington should let us regulate ourselves in this new world of data science? Should we be looking for some national or international agency to help us figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any experience with that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't be too hopeful if it became this big consortium of folks that are, all have their different. This is one thing that I do stress. I mean, this is one thing where we're not for profit. Is that look, this, this data should be shared, but it's also very sensitive data. And researchers are one thing, and even there we got to be careful to anonymize and all of that. But you can imagine at some point if you're a for-profit company and you're saying, well, gee, we got to pay the bills, and the venture capitalists are getting impatient. It becomes very tempting to, hey, maybe we'll sell this data, or maybe we'll market it some way, or or we'll use these cookies to know what type of ads someone might want to watch. Who knows what it might be? So yeah, I don't know whether the kind of for lack of a word, the government or would be in the right position here. I mean, especially because they tend to kind of lag understanding of where the cutting edge is. So yeah, I guess self-regulate is probably the near term, and it'll self-regulate based on what do people trust. Gee, would I want my kid on something that the data is going to be used in some weird way?
Hello, I'm Iman. I'm a master's student at the Graduate School of Education. And it's great work, obviously. And I'm just wondering about the math specific. It seems to be very concept-driven, while a lot of the rhetoric is about project-based learning and experiential learning and constructivist approaches.
Yeah.
And I wonder where you stand on that and whether you're considering, I'm definitely sure there's a lot of constraints around doing this on an online platform, but also a lot of possibilities because of that.
Yeah.
So how do you see that, and what are your plans for it?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question. I mean, in my head, you've always had these kind of two schools of thought, and on one school of thought, you have kind of the traditional basic skills like, hey, look, this is what people have been doing for hundreds of years. Do the traditional problem sets. You do more of it. You get fluent in math, and the connections will form, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the other side, you have like, no, that stifles creativity. The kids don't have time to actually learn to do things, make things, really understand what's going on. They should be building things and doing projects. In my mind, these shouldn't even be competing for the same time. I actually think you should be doing both. I want my children to get a lot of practice, with trig identities or taking the surface area, and hopefully the problems themselves can get as conceptual as possible. I showed a few. Not all of them are there. Some of them are. Like, hey, add these two negative numbers, and we'll give you some hints if you don't know how to do it. So I think there is value of building that core tool set, and at the same time, what we hope is if a lot of that core tool set can happen more efficiently, build your foundations better, that it does free up time to do more project-based learning. I did that summer camp. We were doing these simulations. We were building robots. That's all we did. And in my mind, you kind of want to do both. When I was a teacher at that summer camp, that's what I enjoy doing. I don't want to give another lecture on factoring a polynomial. I want to say, hey, let's build robots and see, and make them fight or something. It doesn't have to be negative, belligerent, but let's actually. This one summer camp, they made the robots dance, which was very nice. But let's do stuff like that. Let's do these market simulations. Let's play Monopoly and keep adding rules to it and see what happens. And so I think you just have to do both. It's not an either or proposition. One thing I'd recommend everyone to web search when they go home, or even now, is a school called Acton Academy, based in Austin, Texas, ACTON. And we've been very close to them. Their founders have been supporters of Khan Academy. They use Khan Academy in the school. And I think they typify what a school should be. It's mixed age, multiple skill levels. They're using tools like Khan Academy for self-paced learning, but you go to that class, most of what they're doing is like drama and building robots and having conversations about the meaning of life, whatever it might be. And so and selfishly, I my son's 4.5 years old and my daughter's 2 years younger than that. I hope that we could do something like that eventually in the Bay Area. I mean, just selfishly as a parent. So I mean that kind of encapsulates what I hope to see more. And we also want to do, if we can do project-based learning online as well, we hope to introduce tools there. So like our computer science platform on Khan Academy is very much like that. You go, you create a project, it's very visual, and you can get feedback from other folks, save your projects in a portfolio, get badges if people vote them up. So we want to do both. Simple answer.
We'll have one or two more questions.
All right.
Stu Levin, Department of Geophysics. My office mate, who is my PhD advisor, is an MIT grad of great distinction. and he saw you interview with the president of MIT.
Oh,
He
yes.
comes back and says, the wrong person's the president.
Oh, no, that's...
However, that's not my question.
Yes.
However, I would like at some point know what you would do if you were president. Now, it's my sister-in-law is a special education teacher in New York, and special education is one of those areas that draws a lot of funds into the, or out of, or draws a lot of the funds available to K-12 education. Where do you see Khan Academy and the open education branch that you're working on focusing on that aspect of education?
Yeah, I mean, special education is, it's, right now we haven't had like a directed project on that. And there's all sorts of different types of special education, different types of needs trying to address. I think, at some point as we get bigger, as we kind of establish ourselves in, for lack of a word, the mainstream, I think we're going to have to go there. I mean, we should go there. And to some degree, and we already get a lot of anecdotal evidence for certain types of special needs kids. This is really connecting with them. It's anecdotal right now, but we get letters from, parents and kids, ADHD, dyslexia. They like seeing the organic writing. They like hearing it. They like being able to repeat it. They like being able to do a lot of problems. Some students on the autism spectrum have seem to be doing really well, but once again, we haven't done any type of a study here, but I hope to do it. I know this wasn't your question, but you kind of alluded to. I will say what I would do if I were emperor of a large research institution, especially one that had a large focus on engineering. I think engineering for a place like Stanford, a place like MIT, when the students show up, they're already educated in kind of a traditional sense of the word educated. They know a lot, and I think when you're in an environment around so many other amazing people and you have tools and facilities, you should be doing nothing but building things and creating things. If architecture school is all about making things and getting feedback. Writing should be all about writing and getting feedback and improving your art and building a portfolio. Similarly, engineering should be all that. And your transcript coming out of MIT or Stanford or anywhere else, what does a 4.9 or 3.9 GPA in computer science mean? For us, when we're hiring at Khan Academy, we'd be much more impressed to say, well, look, you went to Stanford. Here's the 20 things I made. And we'd look at it like, well, that's pretty cool. And here's the feedback my professors and peers gave me on these 20 things I made. That would tell us a lot more about the student, and I think students would enjoy it. And I think it would also, it would bring in more folks into the field, and not just for the sake of egalitarianness, but actually because you need those folks. That right now we're filtering people out of STEM based on how well they know calculus at the age of 17 or 18. And I point this out. That's like filtering out artists based on how well they mix paint, or filtering out dancers based on how flexible they are at age 16. Those things matter. You need to be able to mix paint, or you need to be flexible, but that won't drive your creative expression or your ability to actually contribute to a field. So yeah, I would just make it much more of the hands-on, and maybe a scaffold of tools where you could learn the differential equations, the signal processing as you need it to work on whatever you're making.